As we give you a live look here this morning, Hurricane Milton continues moving its way closer to the west coast of Florida. This very dangerous Category 5 hurricane strengthening back into that Cat 5 yesterday after the eye reformation, and it's expected to bring storm surge in excess of 10 feet, maybe 15 feet. This is a serious storm, folks. Yeah. It's just about 6 o'clock here on our Wednesday morning, and we appreciate you spending it with us. I'm Chris Anderson.
And I'm Constance Jones. Yeah, lots to get to this morning. We're going to start things off with more details on the expected landfall, which is expected later tonight.
Our team of meteorologists have been working throughout the night on your side this morning, covering all of the potential impacts expected on the west coast and all across the state of Florida because of the size of this storm.
Yeah, Adam Berg starts us off with the latest on the storm's track.
Okay, there's the 5 a.m. advisory. We are still talking about a Category 5. Category 5 is 157 and above. At one point, Milton was 180 miles per hour as it was pushing across the northern fringes of the Yucatan Peninsula. And it went through what we call an eye wall replacement cycle, fancy terminology for the smaller eye kind of fell apart and was replaced by a larger eye. Typically, you get a system that weakens when that happens. It did. But then a lot of times you will see it strengthening as well. And it did, back to Category 5 status. So it weakened and now re-strengthening, was back to 165. Now coming down a bit, okay? And I do think that it will continue to weaken, and I'm going to show you why here in a moment. Let's just give you the track and intensity forecast. Here's a snapshot of about 2 a.m. on Thursday. This is the official landfall time. That could change a touch. There are some models that have it coming in just a hair later than that. Doesn't matter. Basically, Wednesday night into the first half of Thursday is when we will be looking at the stormiest conditions, the windiest conditions, and storm surge could be over the top. I'll show you some of those numbers as well. By the time we hit Thursday evening, it's now on the other side of the Florida Peninsula. Okay, so why was this system so warm? You may have heard record-breaking water temperatures, not only where we sit, the entire Atlantic Basin roughly is above average. So everywhere you see yellow and orange here, we are talking above average water temperatures. Blue, below average. Notice, no blue. So this system had plenty of warm water to work with. Ingredient number one for a strong system. You need, basically 80 degrees and above to start getting these things going. Technically 79 and above, you can start to get hurricane formation. We've got water temperatures mid to upper 80s all over the Atlantic, honestly. So that's ingredient number one, okay? And also, there wasn't very much wind shear. What is wind shear? Faster moving winds upstairs in the atmosphere. Hurricanes do not like that. Guess what Milton gets to deal with more and more as we go through time? Some wind shear here. And that's what you see, some of the brighter colors towards the top of the screen. Here's your snapshot Thursday morning when it's making landfall. Why is it a 4 instead of a 5? The wind shear. As you go from green to yellow to red, these are the faster moving winds upstairs in the atmosphere, right? So the blue and purple, less wind shear, orange and red, more. It is definitely dealing with some healthy wind shear. Okay, so this is why it's going to be slightly weaker, but it doesn't have enough time to really spin down as much as we would like, right? And then as it works across the state here, it will turn into a 1. I want to touch on the storm surge again because this is the most important takeaway here. Storm surge warnings in this pink shading here. 10 to 15 feet, Tampa Bay, Sarasota, and then Fort Myers, Port Charlotte area. We're talking 8 to 12 feet. That is catastrophic storm surge. This could be record-breaking for the area. The worst of it will be obviously Thursday morning as it's making its landfall. Thursday afternoon, still some storm surge here. But once we go overnight Thursday into Friday, those winds start making their turn to the north and then eventually northeast. And Chelsea, that is when things should slowly start improving across this region. How about some of our local impacts?
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to see the isolated outer bands of Milton, and that's prompted those tornado warnings early this morning. Locally, our winds will be 35 miles per hour today, 30 to 35, with gusts up to 50. Note, within some of those thunderstorms, those winds could be much stronger. So we could even get 60-mile-per-hour winds in the rain. Rain, though, we will have a lot more dry time in our forecast today than than wet time, meaning we're only looking at about 1 to 3 inches of rainfall. So we are no longer under a flood watch. We are just watching for some of those outer bands to bring that elevated tornado risk. That is going to be what we're watching for. There could be several of them. Notice as we're looking at the tornado threat here, there is the chance that as we go further to the north, this is where many more are likely to be, right where we see that eastern side of the storm. But we're on the tail end. We're on the southern side of the storm. So we're going to get some of those outer bands that do have some of those quick spin-ups within them. There will be frequent tornadoes, especially today, and they will be on the weaker side, EF0, EF1, but they can still do some damage. They can still do roof damage. They can still bring down some trees, or at least some of the weak branches on the trees, and that will be throughout the day today. By tomorrow morning, we drop from a level 3 risk back to a level 1 risk for tornadoes in our area. So that means we're going to be watching for the morning time frame to see some of those outer bands. But it's going to bring a lot of heavy rain with it too, pretty much from Jacksonville to Tampa. Notice that rain steady yet heavy. And then for us, we're dealing with the strongest of those bands, the isolated tornado threat. But steady rain from the time this starts to work in now all the way through Wednesday, and it passes on Thursday further to the north. But for us, again, notice there's a ton of dry time in that forecast for us. But the rain that we do see will be intense, and the rain that we do see will bring maybe that chance for some heavy rain, localized ponding with any of those downpours that come through. But some of the strongest of the wind will start to work in the area as we get into the evening hours tonight. I know Adam started to mention some of the surge. I really think Port Charlotte and Fort Myers are going to see some of the strongest of the surge as we're watching some of that wind start to fill in today. We're likely to start to see some of that water slowly but surely start to push across the coastal areas. And then as we go overnight tonight, some of those gusty conditions will be 70, 80 miles per hour. Some of the strongest of the winds will be high in the atmosphere, and they will weaken just a bit as they come down and interact with the coastal areas and interact with land. A little bit of friction, but still going to be a pretty impactful storm. And now those strong gusty winds last through Thursday. So as we're looking at the potential for storm surge here, zooming in a little bit more, notice that some of the highest of the surge will be on the southern side of Tampa Bay. As you get closer to Sarasota, we'll start to see some of those totals going 6 to 9 feet, even some spots over 9 feet. And then into places like Port Charlotte, the Port Charlotte Bay, this is where we're really going to see some of that highest surge, and into areas of the riverfront. So that water will get pushed into the river. So even places around Fort Myers and north could see some of that higher surge as well as those winds really start to take over. But we'll have more on some of those impacts all across the state of Florida still ahead.
All right, Chelsea, thank you for the impact there. And this morning on the left side of your screen, roads are clearer compared to what you see on the right side of your screen. This was from the same time or late last night, where thousands and thousands of people spent hours in traffic on Alligator Alley trying to escape the hurricane's path and evacuate, which is good to see because they're heeding that warning.
Yeah, but time is running out to protect some of Tampa's most vulnerable areas, like the major hospital that's there. NBC6's Julia Bagg joins us now live in Tampa with details on what's happening to protect that hospital from potentially historic flooding.
Yeah, and Constance, I just spoke with a hospital representative who told me, you know, you don't want this storm to go anywhere, of course, but you really don't want it to come here to the Tampa Bay area because these areas are so vulnerable. Just behind me is Hillsborough Bay. And to give you an idea, Tampa General Hospital is right here on this bay. Think of Mount Sinai Medical Center on Miami Beach. It is on the water. Well, Tampa General Hospital is also on an island, but a much smaller one, and it's surrounded by water on 3 sides. So what do you do to protect something like this? They have put up what they call an aqua fence. Take a look with me right here, and you can see this is what they have erected along the exterior of the hospital. It is a 9-foot high fence. It is set up to limit any water from coming in and actually to keep water out for up to 15 feet of storm surge, and that's exactly as high as they're expecting things could be here in the Tampa Bay area. But the good news is it has worked before. Take a look at some video of how it did for Hurricane Helene. Employees telling me it worked very well for keeping out that storm surge, but now it's got a much bigger challenge. We're talking about a more serious storm and potentially a more direct hit in this area. And how the fence works is the bottom part, as the water accumulates, that actually stabilizes the fence to help keep it in place. It is resistant to high winds and even resistant to projectiles when it comes to keeping that water out. So as for other preparations for the hospital, officials telling us that they also have their own power system, a 16,000 square foot power plant to keep the hospital going. They are removing any employees or patients from the first floor so they won't have to deal with that. They also even have their own water source. Take a listen to what hospital officials are saying about how they are preparing for the storm.
Prepared. We are going to gear up and take care of our patients. We're not going anywhere, and so we're hunkering down, and we're going to manage the storm as it comes.
And as it comes means they have to keep operating. And so they're counting on the structure you see right here to keep that water out. And again, it worked well for Hurricane Helene, but as one employee just told me, now it's round 2. Let's see how it does. Reporting live in downtown Tampa, I'm Julia Bagg. We'll send it back to you, Chris. Constance?
All right, Julia, thank you. Pretty cool system in place,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, definitely. Do what they can because they can't evacuate. It's such a big hospital.
They can't evacuate. Well, businesses in Tampa are preparing for the worst while trying to stay open as long as possible. They tell us this process is much different than just 2 weeks ago with Helene. Several shops and businesses have boarded up. Their windows and their doors as well.
There is nothing left.
Yep.
Look at
everything's
that.
gone.
Barren shelves.
It's gone.
Fort Myers Beach, where it's looking like a ghost town, and for good reason. Again, that storm looks like it could cause major impact in the Fort Myers area. People who live there are taking the evacuation orders very seriously, which is no surprise because they've been through these storms before. That area is still cleaning up after Hurricane Helene and still not fully recovered from Hurricane Ian, which devastated that area 2 years ago.
And let's take you live now to Sunshine Skyway Bridge. This is in St. Petersburg, where it's calm right now. But a closure is expected later today when conditions are expected to deteriorate. Here's a look at Treasure Island, just a few miles away from St. Pete. And it looks more like a ghost town this morning. Police shutting down access to all barrier islands last night until further notice.
Yeah, it's dangerous, so people are getting out and heeding those warnings, which is what we want to see. Live look in our backyard now, Fort Lauderdale, where people here in South Florida, though we're not taking a direct hit from this hurricane, people aren't taking any chances, taking advantage of the sandbag distributions happening all across Miami-Dade and Broward counties and into Monroe County. They have been happening all week long. 3 bridges, by the way, including the Andrews Avenue Bridge, are fully locked down. So that means they are closed to boat traffic. So keep that in mind for all you mariners.
Please take Milton very, very seriously. Now is the time to complete all preparations to protect life and property in accordance with your emergency plan.
Well, the city will have 14 temporary pumps placed in flood-prone locations. Let's take you live now to downtown Miami this morning as the preps are underway for this wicked weather. Miami-Dade County has opened an evacuation shelter for mobile home residents who want to relocate due to possible flooding. The shelter is located at Tamiami Park at the Darwin Fuchs, but it's important to note that the evacuation center is only for mobile home residents only.
All right, let's go down to the Florida Keys now, southernmost point, that famed buoy, and you see the ocean starting to churn up there and roaring ashore, some big waves crashing onto shore. Locals and tourists alike trying to get in some last-minute fun, just like they typically do down in the Florida Keys and in Key West last night, just ahead of this big storm. After talking to some of those locals, it seems like the majority of them aren't too concerned about this storm.
A lot of the people here are just tourists and down here for a good time.
Going to have some bad weather. You can't do a thing about it. At least just try to make the best of it, right?
All right, some areas across the Keys are expected to see about 3 feet of storm surge, so they are getting prepared. You see some sandbagging happening right there. Stay with NBC6. We're on your side with what you need to know on air, online, and across all of our digital platforms. 6:13 is your time. It's Wednesday morning. We'll be right back.